Today I'm going to be sharing my top 7 tips for maintaining a healthy spiritual practice during long-term travel. Hey everyone, Paige here from The True Voyager. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about solo travel, spirituality, entrepreneurship, personal development, and cultivating a life of passion, purpose, and freedom. Last year I sold everything, quit my corporate 9-to-5, and made the transition to becoming a fully remote digital nomad. And I help inspire others to do the same by sharing about my journey. One of the biggest challenges that I've found with long-term travel is maintaining a healthy spiritual practice. When I quit my job last year, sold everything, and bought my one-way ticket to Europe, I knew that it might be hard for me to maintain my spiritual routine. Let's start by talking about the most common challenges of maintaining a spiritual practice while traveling. When you're traveling, whether it's fast-paced or long and slow, for the most part, you're going to be dealing with jet lag, long travel days, unexpected things happening on those travel days. Your routine gets disrupted. If you fall off the wagon, so to speak, with your spiritual practices, it can take some time to find the motivation to get back on and to build a little bit of momentum. And for me, an issue was having limited space in my luggage for my essential spiritual tools. So I definitely struggled with all of these, and it took me some time and adjustment to find my flow and kind of get in my groove. But I also knew that spirituality was one of the most important components of my life, and so I was committed to prioritizing it on my travels. There was a lot of trial and error, but with a little bit of planning on the front end and giving myself the space and graciousness to adjust to my new way of life, I've finally come to a good place where I feel like my current spiritual practice is really working for me. I know that everybody's spiritual practice looks different. For me, the most important components of my spiritual practice are prayer, music, singing, movement, meditation, and ritual. For you, it might be different. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's dance, maybe it's chanting, maybe it's a specific kind of meditation. Whatever your spiritual practice looks like, there's a way to make it work for you. So let's get into my top 7 tips for maintaining a healthy spiritual practice while traveling. I'm also going to be sharing a bonus tip later on, so be sure to stay until the end of the video so you can get the most value out of what I'm sharing with you today. Let's get into it. Okay. Tip number 1, implement a daily non-negotiable. So what do I mean by that? For me personally, my daily non-negotiable is that I pray every morning. That could look different for lots of different people. Even the word prayer can mean different things for different people, but for me, it just means finding a moment of stillness or silence where I can communicate with my higher power. So I recommend something simple. The key to this tip is that it has to be sustainable and it has to be realistic. If you set a goal of meditating 20 minutes a day, chances are if you're embarking on a long-term travel journey, you're gonna have days where that's just not possible. And maybe you'll get there, but all I'm saying is start with a small, tangible goal. Maybe it's 5 minutes of meditation. Maybe it's a morning walk at sunrise. Maybe it's doing 15 minutes of yoga every morning, or even some simple stretching. Maybe it's doing a gratitude list and writing down 5 things that you're grateful for. Something simple, something tangible, something sustainable. So do your best to stick with it. Try not to get stuck in an all or nothing mentality where you think if you miss one day, you just have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you miss a day, no big deal. Just hop back on the wagon and keep going. Tip number 2 is making space for mindfulness in every new location. When you're doing long-term travels, you're obviously staying in either hotels or Airbnbs, or maybe you're staying with a friend, or maybe you're house sitting or something like that. No matter where you're staying, I recommend carving out a space that's yours. Even if you're just staying in a tiny room, maybe it's a chair where you can meditate, sit and meditate every day. Maybe it's a small table where you can put some precious spiritual items that are important to you. I bring a travel altar with me wherever I go. Every new location that I'm in, I always set up my travel altar, and then I have an anchor in that location. I have a space where I can really ground down and do my spiritual practices. Okay, number 3 is pack your spiritual essentials. This tip might not be for everybody because I definitely err on the side of overpacking, and I definitely brought more stuff with me on my international travels than I probably would if I would do it all over again. But I knew that my spiritual practice was a top priority for me, and so I knew there were certain actual physical items that I needed to bring with me. At home, before I started traveling, I had quite a large altar in all of the homes that I lived in, and that was usually in my bedroom, and it would be on a large piece of furniture or a big shelf. All of my beautiful spiritual implements and tools and crystals and tarot cards and beautiful fabrics and pieces of art, little sculptures, talismans, I definitely always prioritized creating a large, beautiful altar wherever I was. And like I said, I knew that I still wanted to create that while traveling, but obviously on a smaller scale. My travel altar includes Palo Santo, plant material or fresh herbs, little votive candles, pictures of my ancestors, my pendulum, some small stones or crystals, different pieces of decorative fabric to anchor the altar, and a lighter, as well as my abalone shell so that I can burn Palo Santo and other plant material. So like I said, this tip might not be for everybody because you might be hearing that and thinking, wow, that's not for me. I would never bring that much stuff traveling. And if that's you, good for you. It looks different for each of us, so you just have to figure out what your priorities are and figure out what works best for you. Maybe it's just bringing your tarot deck and a little piece of fabric that you can do your tarot readings on. Or maybe it's one precious stone or crystal that's really important to you and holds significance. Maybe it's just a few pictures of your family or of your ancestors. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. And maybe you're the type of person where your spirituality isn't actually manifested in any sort of physical form. If your spiritual practice is strictly an internal one, that's totally fine. If so, you can disregard this tip. But if you're like me and you appreciate physical implements to really help anchor you in your spiritual practices and rituals, just figure out which ones are most important to you and figure out a way to pack them safely into your luggage. For me, I made a little bundle and I have a beautiful piece of fabric that I like to actually put on my travel altar once I'm in my location, but I also use it to wrap up the components. I actually have a padded fanny pack that I use to keep all of my travel stuff in because there is some stuff that's fragile, like my abalone shell, or there's other things that are really dear to me that I don't want to risk getting damaged. So I keep almost all of my altar stuff bundled up in the beautiful cloth and then tucked into the padded fanny pack, and that keeps it really safe and protected when it's in my luggage. But whether you're checking your bag or not, you want to make sure that your spiritual travel implements are packed safely within your luggage. So other spiritual essentials that you might want to pack are a travel yoga mat. I have a travel yoga mat from Manduka. I love it. You can literally just fold it up. You don't have to roll it. You can roll it, but it's meant to just be like folded up, and you just keep folding until it's kind of like a small rectangle, and you can fit it right on top of all of your clothing and everything in your luggage. It doesn't weigh very much. It's super convenient. I use it for yoga. I use it for stretching. I actually lay it out in front of my travel altar so that I have a mat to sit on when I'm in prayer or doing ritual. I also brought a tiny wooden rattle or shaker. A big part of my spiritual practice is singing or vocalizing in front of my altar. So for me, having that rattle felt really important to be able to create some simple percussion for myself. So if you're a musician, that might be something to consider. You can get like a tiny little egg shaker or a round wooden shaker, and they don't take up much space at all. Tip number 4, find local nature. Whenever I get to a new location, I always scope out the area and find the nearest park, the nearest river, the nearest hikes. Obviously, if there's something within the area that I can get to by public transit, I make note of that for like longer day trips or longer hikes. But I really like to find some nature that's really close to where I'm staying. And just right now in my travels, I'm staying in a lot of metropolitan cities, so sometimes that is more of a challenge. But many cities do have beautiful parks and public spaces with trees in them. I can do a little bit of research ahead of time, even before I get to the location, and mark within Google Maps where some of these places are. Once you know where these local nature spots are, prioritize spending time in them. And again, going back to the first step of choosing habits that are sustainable and realistic, I would just say prioritize spending some time in those local nature spots. When I'm traveling, I walk all the time and walk everywhere anyway, so it's been easy for me to just include some of those nature spots in my daily walks. Tip number 5, movement. So as I mentioned, for a lot of people, movement and exercise is a really important part of their spiritual practice. Actually, let me know in the comments what your spiritual practice looks like and if movement is an important component for you. And if it is, what kind of movement do you like to do? For me, I stretch almost every morning and I really love yoga. I love all sorts of movement, but specifically in terms of my daily spiritual practice and my daily rituals, stretching is a non-negotiable. And sometimes if I have the space, I'll incorporate a full yoga flow as well. I mean, prioritizing movement is good regardless of whether or not you have an intentional spiritual practice. but it's just something that I definitely recommend. And looping back to the travel yoga mat, if yoga is your thing or stretching is your thing, making sure that you bring that item is going to really help you stay on track and prioritize movement on a regular basis. And also, like an added bonus is if you're struggling with jet lag or feeling exhausted from some long travel days, just whipping out your yoga mat and doing some simple stretches or a little bit of sun salutations can really activate the body and get the blood flow going and kind of give you a little natural energy boost and kind of help you acclimate to your new location and time zone. Tip number 6, utilize digital resources. So I know for many people, meditation and mindfulness is a priority for their spiritual practice. And there's a lot of amazing digital tools out there to make meditation easier. There's tools like Headspace or Insight Timer, and there's a ton of free meditations on YouTube. There's also a lot of independent content creators that have their own meditations that they release. So I highly suggest utilizing some of these tools, especially because meditation is such an accessible form of spirituality. No matter what's happening during your travels, whether you're on a plane or a train or stuck in an airport or waiting at a bus stop, you can find that time to meditate, even if it's as little as like 3 minutes. And some of these apps just really make that so much easier. Tip number 7, take inspiration from your location. So this tip's an interesting one. I noticed that, like, for instance, when I traveled to Istanbul, a lot of the shops nearby where I was staying were selling bundles of lavender. And where I'm from in the Bay Area, it's more rare for you to see something like that. You would see a lot of sage bundles or Palo Santo, but in Istanbul, everybody has the lavender bundles. And so I bought one of those while I was staying there for the month and brought it into my Airbnb, and I used that to do some smudging with it. And it was really nice to have like a different plant and a different scent than I was used to, and know that it was something that the locals were using. It can just be a fun way to incorporate local plants, herbs, or even cultural practices into your personal spiritual rituals while you're visiting that country. All right, so those are my 7 tips for maintaining a healthy spiritual practice while traveling. And I've actually got a bonus tip for you. For me, one of the most important things is being gentle on myself. I don't know if you're anything like me, but if you are, you might have a tendency to be hard on yourself or set unrealistic expectations. And when it comes to maintaining a healthy spiritual practice, or really just maintaining a healthy anything in life, my advice to you is be soft and gentle with yourself. Especially if you're traveling, maintaining a routine that's perfect and consistent at all times is nearly impossible. If you have achieved that, then congratulations and good for you. You should win some kind of award. But for most of us, traveling comes with so many unexpected twists and turns. And if you can just learn to be gentle, be open, be soft, be forgiving, your life is going to be so much easier. Just be gentle with yourself. And if you have a day that doesn't look like you want it to, or if you fall off the wagon of your routine, just understand that that's part of the process. It's okay. You can just start over the next day and keep the momentum going. It's all good. All right, well, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like and subscribe buttons so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video, which is going to be at least once a week moving forward. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.